Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto become Agent of Hell, part 5. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Another couple of days went by in a flash, and suddenly, Genin, who came to enter the exams, found themselves sitting in room 301 of the testing building. The more experienced and knowledgeable of the hopefuls found themselves slightly intimidated by their proctor. Konoha's very own Ibiki Marino, Leaf's top interrogator, and master of physiological interrogation tactics. While they knew a bit more about him than the other rookies, they still didn't really know what to expect, so they mentally prepared themselves for anything. But unlike them, the younger ninjas who didn't know anything were mostly clueless about the intimidating man, leaving them to fear only his appearance without knowing what he was truly capable of. Ibiki had a field day with him. By the time Enko and the blonde devil arrived, they found that Ibiki had proved himself a master at mental torture. Half of the seats were empty, and the remaining ninjas looked haggard and on the brink of insanity. Too bad for them, Enko and the blonde had dark senses of humor, and were more than happy to send them on to the next stage of the exams, much to the Genin's annoyance and stress. "You maggots understand," Enko yelled out, as she explained the second exam. "You'll be spending a whole week here. By the end you must have to have a set of these scrolls, and be in the tower or else you fail." Naruto stood at the doorway to the tent, where the teams would hand in their consent forms, and receive their scroll. Each team had to show him 3 clear signatures, before he would let them in, but honestly, he wasn't really paying attention. Not that they would be able to get a scroll without the whole team signing it, the inside the tent would have to check too. Kairu walked up to him. "Is it done?" he questioned before allowing another team in. She nodded. "Good." Another team exited, and another entered. "Kairu, I want you to go to the Hokage Tower, and find any information that you believe to be valuable to the 4 visiting delegations. Report back to me at the tower in the center of the forest here, and relay your findings," he told her with a low tone. The blonde thought for a second, then looked at Enko, who was across the clearing. "Also look up the files on her, and my news pet." The cloaked demon fox nodded. "Yes sir." With that she left, and Naruto let the last team in before Enko yelled out for them to go to their pre-assigned gates, which they had been given along with their scroll. With the Chunin hopefuls clearing out, Naruto walked up to Enko with his ladykiller smile. At first she had been pissed off that she had to have someone help her with the exams, showing her displeasure by sending a stream of curses and kunai at him, before he forced her to stop, reducing the weapons to a molten mass of melted steel with his hellfire which burned the grass where they landed. Faced with that, and what he could do, she didn't attack him physically, but continued to voice her opinion very loudly. What he did to shut her up was amazingly stupid, and took balls made from brass. He kissed her. Not some Grandma Pecker schoolyard smooch, but a taste what you ate kiss while pushing her up against a tree, and copying a feel of her ass with one hand while holding her chin with the other. She quickly dropped any hostility, and mewed like a kitten, as his tongue played with hers, and any thoughts of biting his tongue off never crossed her mind. But once he stopped, and pulled back, her fury ignited with the intensity of the sun. Their fight lasted a good hour before he once again slammed her down, and pinned her under his body. "Well Enko-chan, looks like we have a whole week together in the middle of a dangerous forest, far from any foolish civilians." The woman turned, and grinned at him. All alone she started, before walking up to him, and pressing up against him. "And at my mercy," he smirked while running his fingers along her side. "Why don't you show me around the tower, my little snake?" He smirked, his eyes glowing a hellish crimson, while he watched her own light brown orbs flash a similar shade, as her fingernails sharpened into claws. Poor little human, the once proud Kunoichi reduced to a mere shadow of her former self, a pet to his whims, and brought to her knees against his gentle caresses. "I don't think that I was able to write the time right on this part, so let me give a quick run through." Gar and her siblings made it to the tower on the first day. Nearly a day later the other teams slowly started coming in. While all of this is happening, Naruto and Enko don't show up for obvious reasons. The next part happens nearly 48 hours into the exam. By the end of the day, Naruto and Enko were joined in the tower by one team. Gars, who shattered the previous record by showing up to the tower with both scrolls within 6 hours, beating the old record by well over 16 hours. But Naruto and Enko weren't there to welcome them, and the Suna ninjas found themselves alone, until a few more teams slowly made their way in over the next few days, occupying the bottom floors, while the top half was strangely locked. Not even some of the more curious ninjas could pick or force the lock at first. "Will you shut up?" Iwanin growled over his shoulder, as he knelt down in front of the lock. He and his team had made it through the forest, and after getting some of their smaller, less serious wounds checked, found a door leading up to the 4th floor which was locked. Normally something like that wouldn't bother them, but they didn't want to be anywhere near the other ninjas, especially Konoha dogs. His teammate, a tough-looking girl, crossed her arms. "Well, stop taking so long." He let go of the lockpicks. "You think you can do better?" he demanded while glaring at her. "If so, what are you waiting for?" She stiff-armed him aside. "Move." He crossed his arms and watched as she took the picks and pushed them in his arms. Watch this. With a growl, the girl took a step back and lunged forward, denting the wooden door with her shoulder, before repeating the action once again. It buckled slightly, but held, so the British girl kicked the handle until the sound of breaking metal rang out. "That's how you open a door," she spoke in a boastful voice while turning to smirk at her team. But instead of looking at her, they were pale and gazing over her shoulders at something. Ever so slowly she turned her head and stood face to face with the muscled blonde wearing only a pair of pants, while staring at them with a sharp glint in his eyes. "You know, when someone locks a door, it usually means that you're not allowed there." His tone was sharp and low, full of ice and danger. Breaking into a locked room here could be considered an act of aggression or sabotage, and with our village's past relations, some could use this little stunt to fuel the flames of war. The three glanced at each other, not only because of what he said, but because said blonde looked just like the fourth, the man who had killed army of Iowa ninjas with his signature techniques, to become somewhat of the Bujiman to the younger generations, a threat used by parents to keep their children from acting up or to get them to go and do their chores. The Iowa genin were reliving the tales that their parents told, or what they had heard, so they weren't too keen on speaking up to defend themselves. The physically strong girl looked like a ghost, while her two male teammates instinctively hid behind her. A pair of slender arms snaked around his waist. "Where'd you go?" said a voice that they quickly recognized as the woman who explained the second part of the exam to them. Enko pressed against his back and propped her chin up on his shoulder to peer over and see who it was. "Just a few curious little genin, nothing to be concerned about," he dismissed without looking away. "They were here to repair this door that they broke by accident, isn't that right?" His voice chilled their insides, and they quickly found themselves nodding. The two Konoha ninja backed up and watched as the three scrambled to pull the door in place and haphazardly fix it. The door looked ready to fall at any given second, but they really didn't give a shit, since they had really taken over the top floor, where Anko had set up her home away from home. It was much more secure than other areas, built to be used as a war room if they were invaded, and the Hokage's tower happened to be lost, destroyed or otherwise. It was sealed off from the hallway by a heavy steel door made to withstand most attacks, and chakra blades that could normally cut into the metal, but not all the way. It also had plenty of emergency rations sealed away there, and after a few years of free reign there, Anko had made it into a small house with a small kitchen, a huge bed, and even a small dining table, all of which had finally been christened the night before. Anko and the blonde appear in the room again, the blonde in his pants, while Anko wore only her panties. Now that that's over, she giggled before leaping on his back and wrapping her legs around him. "Let's pick up where we left off," he chuckled as she tried to dominate him once again, licking his neck and biting it hard enough to break the skin. But like all the other times, Naruto grabbed her by the hair and flipped her over his shoulder roughly, getting a demonic grin and growling in return. "Come, O child, born of lust, demon seed, and human husk," he smirked as the girl's brown eyes turned red. She flipped over and lunged at him wildly. He knew that she felt familiar to him, not in the sense that he had seen her before, but her presence seemed somewhat familiar. It wasn't until he had marked her as another pet of his that her demon linkage was awakened fully. She was a part demon, not a half. Usually a part demon didn't have many abilities like a full demon, or even a half demon, but she was an exception. She had the blood of Lilith coursing through her veins, the queen of the succubi. He had heard that the beautiful demoness had had a son with a mortal man, giving birth to a half-demon incubus who was killed years ago. Seemed that Anko was his child with a mortal woman. He once again flung her down and pinned her, his own eyes turning red. He knew that she was envious of his eyes, where only the brown part of her eyes turned red. His whole eye turned red and glowed if he wanted. Only powerful devils like him and Lucifer could do that at will, while demons only did it when they went into an uncontrollable rage. "Try all you wish, little succubus, not even your grandmother and your aunts couldn't make me submit." They kiss, wildly exploring each other's mouths before losing each other in fits of passion. Somewhere near a hot spring, a perverted old man with white hair looked up and peered around. "My pervy senses are tingling. To everyone gathered here, I congratulate you for completing the..." Naruto stopped listening as he took up the Hokage's right flank while Kairu took the left. The week had been relatively boring between listening or reading any reports from his little fox, while half of the teams from the first exam made it in. He was quickly brought out of his thoughts, as the Hokage's little speech was stopped by a certain ninja, the same man whose life he could end now with a snap. He looked a lot better, to tell the truth. The dark rings around his eyes were nearly gone, and he didn't look like he was about to fall over at a moment's notice. Payade explained that since there were so many teams left over once again, they would have to hold preliminary matches to determine who would continue to the finals a month away. Then after that, the tournament will begin, and he will be fighting. What better way to show off his might than in front of multiple cages and daimyo, including their families. Gara of Suna vs Lee of Konoha. The two made their way down to the lower floor where they would fight, Lee choosing to leap over the rails while the redhead walked down the steps, glancing at her master who stood next to the Hokage. "Break him." She blinked. Had she really heard that? Was she hearing things? No one else seemed to hear that, and she hadn't seen his lips move at all, only a slight narrowing of his eyes. The tanuki hadn't spoken since her master claimed her as his and stopped tormenting her all the time to murder people. The man stood between them and raised his arm before swiping it in a downward arc, calling out for them to start before leaping back. Lee got into his stance as the cork on her gourd crumbled into sand, falling into the gourd with the rest of it before it all started streaming out and pulling around her. The energetic boy sped towards her after saying something about youth and stringing together a vicious combo of punches and kicks, only for the sand to gain a life of its own, jumping up to block every strike with ease. This continued for a while, Lee trying his best to strike the girl from every side as she just stood there, trying to track his quick movements. She had to admit, he was fast, so fast that she could only see him just before he struck, luckily for her that her demon was able to sense him. Suddenly, the sand shifted to block a strike from the rear, but it first appeared a foot away from her face. Lee faked the attack from the back and sped to strike her front. Gaara blinked, and just inches before he hit, the sand caught him in an iron-like grip around his wrist. The leaf ninjas who knew about his speed gasped, shocked that the sand had caught him. Lee cried out, as the sand twisted his arm before a whole wave of it slammed into his front like a massive hammer, sending his body tumbling back, while a few drops of blood from his now busted lip hit the floor. The sand shifted to soak it up. The sand wants your blood, she stated in an icy cold tone, much like Naruto's own. Guy yelled out to Lee that he could take his weights off, and the match took a turn in Lee's favor. Naruto watched, thinking of the irony of this match. Lee was Guy's student, and by the looks of it, his clone while Gaara was his pet, and somewhat of a student. Ironic that the two would fight just like he and Guy had, although he never had the trouble that Gaara seemed to be having. Those weights that Lee had on weighed more than they looked, and with the burden lifted, his speed doubled. He was barely a blur, and even the sand had a hard time keeping up. The sound of fists meeting flesh rang out, and he saw Gaara's feet leave the ground. Impressive for pure muscle, he spoke, as Gaara was knocked around like a pinball by Lee, sent higher and higher before the bandages around Lee's arms wrapped themselves around the girl. The pair plummeted to the ground, and seconds before impact, Lee jumped away, and Gaara collided head first into the stone floor, kicking up dirt and stone. Lee huffed and waited. By the look on his face he was feeling guilty, thinking that he had killed the girl. Paid stepped forward, winner. But before he could finish, a large ninja star flew from the smoke cloud, spinning so fast that it sounded like a huge bandsaw. Lee had to jump to the ground, as it was aimed at his chest, and everyone watched in awe, as it impacted on the wall, exploding into sand, after cutting a large gorge into the wall. The smoke cleared, and they saw the Redite standing there in a pile of sand with her gourd missing, and a demonic grin on her face. I can feel as she chuckled insanely, this power it's his. Naruto cocked his head to the side, and wore a small, unnoticeable grin. So the mark had awakened interesting. The mark he used on her was different from what he used on Anko or Yugao. Anko only needed the mark, and Yugao sold her soul to him. Gaara was a full human, and the ritual implanted a bit of his own devil chakra in her, much like Orochimaru's little curse mark. It would connect them, but unlike the stupid human, it didn't split his soul into smaller pieces. His devil powers would connect them, and he would always be able to tell where she was if he wanted. It also gave her a large boost in case her life was threatened. It was temporary, but unlike demonic chakra, his devil chakra wouldn't burn her skin off while healing it at the same time. It wasn't perfect though. While it sounded unbeatable, there were drawbacks. A human's chakra system wasn't meant to channel the devilish power, so much of the power was wasted, and once it started you kept on until the chakra ran out or your attacker was dead. Lee took a few steps back, as he got over the shock of what he was seeing, but it was for naught. Faster than he could blink, Gaara vanished, and appeared behind him with her fist already in flight. Lee's skull made a loud smacking sound, as she nailed him hard enough to crush the stone beneath him, breaking his nose, and possibly even his skull, or giving him brain damage. The girl kicked him over so that he was on his back, and before anyone could stop her, she had straddled his gut, and was wildly punching him over and over in the face, while screaming like a wild beast. "Stop it!" Hayate yelled, as he tried to break them apart and save the boy's life. But Guy had beaten him to it, and tried to pull the red head off his student, wrapping his arms around her waist, and pulling her back only for her to elbow him in the jaw, forcing him to release her, just as she sensed another presence. The girl turned, swinging her fist at the person only for it to be caught in the vice-like grip of Naruto. "That is enough." The voice of her master cut through the haze of rage like a razor blade through cloth, and to the amazement of her sensei and family, she calmed down instantly. "Your match is over, you won. Now calm yourself, and return to your team." She looked at the unmoving teen she had just beaten, then back at Naruto before turning, and doing as she was told, stopping just long enough for her gore to reform, and fill back up before walking up the steps, and standing near her team. Naruto looked at Lee, who was being lifted onto a stretcher by a few medics, careful as not to hurt him anymore or move his neck in case it was broken. I looked worried and angry, but Lee had signed a waiver and knew the risks. Hayate had made sure that they knew killing your opponent was allowed, but frowned upon. Even then it was only if they refused to give up. Once they were out cold, your match was over. The only thing that saved Gar from any possible trouble was that no one knew Lee when Lee lost consciousness, as it had all happened so fast. He vanished and retook his place beside the Hokage, as the board on the wall flashed the final 2 names. Stopping first on the girl from Iowa who had broken his door, and a Kumo ninja. Sadly for the poor Kumonin, the Iowa girl humiliated him by beating him over the head and breaking his legs within the first minute for calling her sexually confused because she had some muscles. So after being carried out of the room with his legs twisted and bent so that his toes touched his hips, the genin were gathered and told to pick from a box that held a number for each person. The remaining ninjas found themselves hoping that they didn't have to face that sand girl after what they saw her do. Hayate recorded the numbers and announced the names before telling them to meet at the stadium, the same one that Naruto fought in against the senseis. So with the genin leaving the tower arena, the Hokage dismissed Naruto and Kyuubi, telling them that he would be returning to his office to catch up on his paperwork. Then muttering about the damned able things fornicating on his desk and reproducing just to mock him. All questions of insanity due to age aside, Naruto and Kyuubi left the tower. They turned to the old man and keep up appearances. As his guard, Naruto ordered the fox. As they walked, I want to hear about anything worthwhile you find out while there. Kyuubi nodded, yes master. Good, now run along my pet. I have a soul to claim, and another tool to add to my collection. In Konoha's Shinobi Hospital, doctors and nurses worked non-stop trying to mend and fix the shattered bones and spine of Rock Lee. He had come in a limp mass, and, as time went on, things were getting grimmer and grimmer. The boy's spine was badly broken, and his days as a ninja were over. In fact, his days of walking, and quite possibly ever using his arms, were over, if he even woke up at all. Besides his broken back and shattered dreams, scans told the ninja doctors that his brain had taken a massive beating, and parts of his skull were fractured. After a few hours, they were starting to lose hope, saying that it would take a miracle. Inside Lee's mind, Lee looked at the cloaked man with wide eyes. Greetings Mr. Lee, you may call the benefactor. A few hours later, Naruto was walking away from the hospital with a smirk on his face. Humans were so easy to twist. Just like how he had break dates with her boyfriend, lying about something that only a fool would believe to be true, before coming to him. Speaking of her, Naruto had a sudden craving for ramen, and vanished to go get some guesses. Some things never change. Arriving moments, Naruto sat down, and saw a guy around the same age as him flirting with said ramen waitress. He was a thin man with brown hair like hers, and green eyes. He also wore a promise ring on his hand just like here. Oh Shuji, she giggled, you know I'm saving myself for marriage. Love was a powerful tool, and a deadly weakness. She turned to Naruto, telling Shuji to hold on a minute before walking over. Hi Naruto-chan. She greeted. Hey Wani-chan, I'd like my usual hold of the desert. He smirked, as she nodded with a light blush, knowing what he was talking about. Luckily her boyfriend was on the other end of the bar, and wasn't able to see it, as she turned quickly, and called to her father that Naruto wanted his usual order. The old man looked over the back window where he would pass the balls through, and smiled at the blonde, as they had met, and caught up a while ago. He returned the smile, and Aim went back to her boyfriend, sparing her master a quick look, as she passed. So we are still on for this weekend, he asked with a smile. The girl made a show of thinking it over. This weekend is okay, but I'm going to be busy studying till Friday. I have a test to take then, and I have to pass. That excuse was new. The man's watch made a small beeping noise. Dang, I'm almost late for work, he muttered. The two shared a quick goodbye, and he bolted down the road, leaving Naruto the only person at the stand besides the two cooks. A test. He chuckled, as she leaned on the counter next to him. He honestly believed that. What do you mean? She asked innocently with a hidden smile. Wani-chan, 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 when will you learn that I can easily tell when you are lying? Besides, I know that school has been cancelled for the next month for anyone in high school, and up, your college classes included. She smiled. Well, why would I need him when I have you? She whispered, as not to let her father hear. Well said my little chief, well said. The ramen soon arrived, and the two made small talk, while the blonde ate. Then he stopped. The holy aura from that thing had suddenly vanished. He couldn't even sense any, or where it was now. He had made a grave mistake. At first he had thought that it was a trap or some overpowered fool who couldn't control its own aura. But with the sudden disappearance of what had become an almost daily thing, he knew that it was only one angel or something. If he had to guess from the stories and things he had learned in hell, it had to have been one of the Hellguard, a special elite unit of angels who were like the Anbu of holy beings. As no normal angel would have been able to pump out all that aura for so long, then suddenly suppress it. This warranted some investigation, and luckily for him he was in the perfect position to have a team sent out to look for anything suspicious. Not that he truly expected the humans to find anything, he'd have to send one of his own pets out with them, as his power inside them would allow them to see things that others wouldn't be capable of. Finishing up his ramen, Naruto dropped a few yen notes on the counter then vanished. Hiruzen was always glad for a distraction from his paperwork, but what Naruto had just told him bordered the line between a welcome distraction and more work. Apparently a radical being was trying to hunt him down, most likely an angel who wanted nothing more than to see him burning back in hell or completely destroyed. Now the old man knew that about religion, and all. As the Hokage he knew about a lot of the goings-on of his village, and didn't get through his life being ignorant to the views and lifestyles of others. But Naruto was a good person despite what had happened to him. As a child, he was also a ninja of his village, and, as such, he would do what he could to help the blonde. Including sending Yugao and her squad out to check out the direction in which he had last sensed the being. He had already stated that whatever it was, would probably be gone, but the old man just nodded, saying that even though they might not find it, they may find clues or something. The old man sent an Anbu messenger to go find the squad leader, and turned to Naruto, "So you're going to be fighting in the tournament?" It wasn't a question, as the blonde had made the fact clear weeks ago. Naruto nodded. "Well, I hear that the villages participating are going to be sending some of their best. Even a few other minor hidden villages have requested a spot to join in on the tournament." Of course they would. This is a great time to advertise their village skills. Even if they don't get far, they could still impress some important people. Naruto mused. "So am I representing Konoha alone, or is someone else fighting? I've been approached by a lot of people who want to join, but each village has agreed that only a maximum of 6 ninjas can enter to fight for their respective homes. So have you chosen the other 5 yet?" The Hokage paused to pick up a list. "Well, aside from you, I haven't been able to decide. Guy and Kakashi wanted to join, so did Anko, and a few others along with a couple Anbu. I haven't really went through and chose yet." "Well, good luck with that, but on a different note, I'd like to request a few missions, preferably a bandit extermination for my summons." Hiruzen blinked. "What?" "My summons have a taste for blood, and love the thrill of a hunt. As I told you before, they are the perfect hunters, and, as their summoner, they will obey me or else. Besides, it's high time those bandit camps are removed." With a small nod, Hiruzen pulled an A-rank mission scroll out, and handed it to the blonde. "Thanks, old man, you've made a little Nightwalker very happy," he said with a smirk before leaving. Naruto stood off to the side, and watched, as a foreign delegation arrived. They were quite early too, as they still had close to 2 weeks before the final stage began. Truthfully, he had expected them only a day or so before the event, but it would seem that the Reikage wanted to show up much earlier for some reason. Then again, Kyuubi had told him that Sarutobi had spoken something about there being a new Reikage, that the old one was executed by his own people for nearly starting a war, because of the attempted kidnapping of the Hyuga heirs. So he was possibly here to try, and repair the broken trust from long ago. Leaning up against the wall, where a shadow would cover him, Naruto looked at the tan-skinned man, as he walked in front of his shinobi. He was very well built, and looked like he could punch holes in steel. His hair was combed back, and almost white, but in the sun you could tell that it was just a very pale blonde. The man wore Reikage robes without a shirt underneath, and Naruto could see some strange braces on his arms. Hiss. Naruto looked down at his ankle, and saw a pair of yellow eyes looking up at him with a pair of small horns above them. "You're what a nice surprise." He started slowly, as he reached down, and allowed the snake to slither up his arm. It hissed tiredly. "You have no idea how hard it is for me to travel from Sauna to here." He told his master, "A wolf tried to eat me twice. I'm so tired. I did not call for you, little serpent. Your journey was for nothing." Naruto told it, as the snake wrapped around his arm, and laid its head on his shoulder. "Master, I was told to bring you a message." Yura hissed with his forked tongue tasting the air. Naruto raised an eyebrow from who? Levi's Firo. That got his full attention. Really, what was it? He said that he needed you to help him with something, that you'd know what to do something about his stone. Naruto's eyes whitened then narrowed, as his mouth curled into a smirk. "I see that's his plan. Your usefulness in Suna has run out. You're going to stay here, and continue your assignment." Yura nodded tiredly. "Yes, master, but can I rest first?" "Sure." With that, the snake relaxed on his arm, and Naruto got lost in thought. Levi's Firo, the Lightbringer, better known as Lucifer the Fallen One. It was one of the old names the devil went by years ago, the same one he used when he was still on Earth, and created the stone he now needed to find. With it he would be able to unleash hell on Earth, and cause untold chaos. Lucifer had been searching for it for years, as best as he could while being confined in hell, as per the pact that forced them to end the war. The stone itself was blessed, and cursed, for the wearer would be protected from dying of old age or sickness, but would be driven mad, committing horrible atrocities on a whim. Humans called it the Philosopher's Stone. A stone with the power to grant its holder immortality against time and health, made from the souls of 10,000 mortals. Many lives have been destroyed by its allure, minds driven to madness, families ruined. Naruto glanced at the group walking down the road, then decided that the stone was much more important. So he left, and returned to his manor. He had a stone to locate, but first he would have to talk to his creator. He wouldn't just tell him that he needed to find it without already having a clue as to where it was. The blonde sat on the floor of his living room holding a knife in one hand, while blood poured from his wrist in a steady flow. Below him was a pentagram drawn in his own blood with a long line of symbols around it, with even more branching off. While the blood was pouring out, as a steady flow, seeing as he had cut a few veins, he knew that once the ritual started his healing would easily take care of it. He just needed a good flow of blood. He dropped the blade, and started chanting, raising his arms, as his hands were engulfed in flames, quickly followed by the blood on his floor. A few moments passed, and the roaring blaze died down until a small ring of fire remained, leaving the devil himself standing proud in the middle of his living room. Ah, the smell of the human realm. Lucifer mused with a deep inhale. A stench of sin much like that of a festering wound. This damnable village is a boil on the ass of the world, filled with self-righteous puss which lord over others while hiding behind their names, demanding the respect that their ancestors earned, and they don't deserve. Naruto started dryly. The Prince of Darkness shrugged, so nothing's really changed. I guess, but tell me why the sudden message. Lucifer smirked. Well, at first I believed that the stone was lost, as its last carrier had hidden it when I could not feel my power coming from it. But not too long ago I felt a small surge from it. I can only feel it when someone is touching, or wearing it, so I believe that someone has unknowingly found the Philosopher's Stone, and is now carrying it with them. So you want me to search for it, and steal it back? Lucifer chuckled. Of course not, a child, it will come to you. Besides, you need not deviate from your plans. Of course. Lucifer looked down at the ring of fire, and reached out, letting the tip of his finger go out of it, only for the digit to hiss, and smoke, the skin bubbling, and melting until the bone showed in spots. Damn those angels, and our pact, he hissed, as he calmly pulled back, watching, as everything quickly regrew. We need that stone, child, with it you can force the gates of hell to open. And bring about 1,000 years of darkness, the blonde added. Lucifer nodded, and they both smirked. Yum giggled, as the camp was raided by her, and her family. Lord Naruto was so kind, giving them a chance, to come out into the human world, to feed on the flesh of mortals, especially these sinful men. They had a wonderful taint that made their flesh spicy, and sharp to the taste. Although, she, and a few others were quite fond of the sweetness that the flesh of the innocent had. But then again it was all about personal taste. She watched, as a man tried to escape her, and laughed joyfully, as she pounced on him like a lion, her teeth already halfway in his neck before they fell. His scream died out, and turned into bloody gurgles, as she ripped chunks of meat from him, blood spraying out like a busted pipe, as she ate what she ripped off. Another man was tackled not too far from her, his fat overweight frame jiggling, as he screamed with an older woman digging her knee into his back. Scream, little piggy. The monster crackled, some of her hair stuck to her face, the blood from her victims covering most of her head and arms. She was Kame Hanta, mother of Yum Hanta, and lover to Mito Hanta. Kame was the alpha of her pack, and alpha of their kind. She was also an oddity. After giving birth to Yum, she killed her husband whom she had seemed to love for years, and was soon seen with Mito, the younger girl of her clan. The child never questioned it, nor did anyone else, as the real shock had happened years ago when the woman had announced that she had married a man, and was trying to get pregnant. But then again, those that knew her knew that she loved women, and admitted that her love for him seemed a little bit forced. Yum giggled again, as her mother broke his arms, then grabbed his head, pulling back until the sound of cracking bones and ripping flesh was heard, proving that she was easily capable of pulling a man's head off without any trouble. Soon the whole clearing was littered with body parts, and painted with blood. The bandit camp of over 20 strong was reduced to a pile of bodies by only a group of 7 nightwalkers. With the exciting part over, the demons choose their meals, and begin gorging themselves happily. Yugao watched in horror, as her team of highly trained Anbu were beaten by this strange woman with a white and gold naginata. She had wanted to engage and help, but something stopped her, making her freeze, and lock up like a terrified genin. It wasn't killing intent, as the woman dressed in white made sure that she didn't kill them, only knocking them out. Why has she attacked them? They hadn't threatened her in any way, nor had they even said anything to her. She just struck out of thin air. I can feel your unholy taint, Kushina said slowly, as she readied her weapon, looking at the masked Anbu closely. Suddenly the purple-haired woman kneeled over, gasping and crying, as she wrapped her arms around her gut. So you finally show your true self, creature of hell. The woman stood up after a minute, chuckling. I can feel you, as well as the dog Kami. I felt your sickening aura for days. Kushina blinked. It wasn't a female voice, but a man's. I wondered when I'd speak with you, you filthy dog. I even made sure that this human stayed out of the fight, so that it'll just be the two of us. You possessed her. The possessed body nodded. Indeed I have. That made Kushina prepare herself to strike. I wouldn't do that, for you see, this shell isn't alone, she's carrying a little one. The redhead frowned, using a pregnant woman as a shield. No, you see, this little human belongs to me. Even if you tried to rid her of her demon, I am merely possessing her from a long distance. She sold her soul to me along with her freedom. Monster. Yuga's body chuckled. Really? I like to think of it as saving her. Kushina snarled. Saving her? You stole her soul, and made her a slave. Perhaps the same could be said of all religions, slaving their lives away, and praying for things to happen, pleading with their kami, to heal them or their family. The only difference I see, is that I kept my side of the deal. She wanted her lover to get better, I did it. Tell me of your master, little dog. Does she answer the prayers of her followers? As Kushina gritted her teeth, as this person insulted Kami, the possessed woman reached up, and pulled off her mask, exposing her face, which now had 3 long splits on her right cheek like someone had run a razor across her face, while holding the skin taut. The other change was now she had glowing red eyes. You need not answer the dog, you are enough. Just know that I shall be waiting for you in Konoha, so will every hunter nin, Anbu, Jounin, and Chunin, once they learn of what you did. Kushina was confused, but it didn't last long before the possessed woman made clones of her, and killed the other Anbu. Right now, this poor little soon-to-be mother is watching. As you kill her team, when she returns she will tell them of what you did, and that will be enough to have you targeted. Even if they look into her mind, they'll only see what I want her to see, she chuckled, as the angel growled. And the best part is you can't even stop me for returning her to the village, I'm already gone. With that, Yugao's eyes rolled up into the back of her head, and fell to the ground, bursting into smoke. Kushina stood there, watching the smoke from the multiple clones fade into the sky. She had only attacked to knock them out because she felt the demonic signature on one of them, and didn't want to hurt the others, just because they wanted to protect one of their own. Then they probably never even knew was possessed. But now that she had a chance to really think about it, her heart sank. Naruto was the only one that they knew could even be able to possess someone, and Kami had said that no other devilish presences were in the village. Naruto opened his eyes, and smirked. Hey B, who's that next to the Hokage? B looked at the blonde next to him. Both he and Yujido, the container of the two-tailed hellcat, were both standing a bit behind the Reikage A, who just so happened to be B's older brother. It's the ghost, the Hokage's second bodyguard, he said without trying to make a rap out of it. Thanks to the numerous threats made by A that should he embarrass him, he'd be punished. Well, the threat had never worked before. It helped when A told him that had quite a few of his kunoichi, who would gladly grind his balls to dust over and over again. He also wanted to showcase his skills in the tournament, so he had to behave till then. The ghost? Yujido repeated slowly so as not to disturb the two cages while they talked. The cloaked woman had made a name for herself in other villages, because the village would sometimes send them back to their home village if they didn't have any valuable information, meaning that when they returned they reported that not only they had been caught, but so had the others. I was wondering when you'd show up. Dara looked at her blonde master, as he sat in a lawn chair by the car pond, reading a book. I expected you earlier, to tell the truth, he intoned while flipping the page, but it has given me time to catch up on my reading. What was that power? He closed the book with a snap. It was my power. The mark which makes you mine is more than a show of who you belong to, it's also a backup to keep you alive for me when I can't. So I can use it. Only when your life is in danger or if you're extremely angry, he speaks, interrupting her. It's not something to use whenever you feel like it, it's to keep you alive. I see, she stated. Truth be told, she loved that feeling using his power gave her. It was so, for lack of a better term, powerful. Like nothing could stop her. It made her feel all those dead emotions that she had long since forgotten, well, all those that having sex with him didn't make her feel. Now my dear, let us see how much you have improved. Dara blinked, as her master settled himself in a stance, and popped his neck before sprinting towards her. The gourd on her back exploded into sand, and rushed to intercept his leg, as he jumped to deliver a heel drop to her skull. Since he wanted her to defend herself, the sand responded unlike the other time. His aura was terrifying to her inner demon, and it wasn't willing to go against a higher rank being of hell without a good reason like now. A small shock wave ran through the sand, as his leg impacted, causing a few loose particles to fall, before moving back up with the rest of the sand. But, as he connected, the mass tried to grab a hold of his foot much like it did to Lee, but Naruto vanished before it could get a good grip. Dara scanned her surroundings, and waited for him to attack, making a few smaller versions of the sand shuriken, while leaving enough sand to defend herself. The movement off to the side caught her attention, and she turned to see Naruto rushing at her with speed. Sending 3 sand shuriken at him, Gura watched, as he flipped over them, the sand falling apart after cutting into the ground a little ways. Landing in a crouch, Naruto vanished in a flash, and reappeared slightly behind her with his hand sailing towards her. Pop. Gara's pale green eyes whitened, and she threw her hips forward in pain. Reaching back, and clutching her rear, the red hat let out a yelp of pain, which made the sand around them fall to the ground. A bright red handprint appeared on her rear underneath her clothing. But before she could do anything else, Naruto grabbed her arms, and pulled her back into his chest, letting go for a second to wrap one arm around her, while his other hand grabbed her neck. There's some improvement, he spoke deeply before his tongue flicked her ear, but not enough in my eyes. She shuddered at the feel of his tongue on her earlobe. Now let's see you defend against this. Dara stumbled, as he pushed her forward. Quickly gaining her footing, she turned to see him vanish, and reappear at the far corner of his property, slinging a single kunai at her, while making a single hand seal. One turned into 100, and her sand quickly formed around her to make a protective barrier. She stood there, listening to the massive kunai, as they whistled at her, only to hear multiple popping sounds. Got you? She froze again, the voice of her master echoing in her ear, as his hot breath. Trapped in your own technique, he chuckled, as he loosened her sash from around her waist. I know the perfect punishment. Sir Toby and the A had dismissed their guards, finding common ground, and quickly becoming something not quite on the level of friends, but enough to share a drink. So in the past week your bandit population has been nearly wiped out? I asked in wonder, as all nations had a slight bandit problem along with problems with Nuknin. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, 3 of the larger camps that had missing ninjas leading them have been totally destroyed. With that news, most have been scared into disbanding, while those others are soon to meet their ends. How did you manage? At this, the Hokage sighed. I don't agree with the method, but my personal guard Naruto had some of his people take care of it. Your guard has his own unit? I asked with a raised brow. I was under the impression that your village didn't support separate branches that didn't report to you. His situation is different. He works directly for me, not the village. He's under contract, as my bodyguard, because of some mistakes this village has made in the past. Hey, he was telling half-truths. Besides, he was the Hokage, and he needed to make his village look stronger, especially now. He still didn't answer me, Hokage-sama. The old man nodded. I had a few ninjas go study the aftermath, and document everything he started while picking up a folder. While scrolls were mainly used, folders and files were used for important things like ninja records, and this was going right next to Naruto's personal file once he was finished. I knew that the file was important. The question of why he was showing this to another Kage flashed across his mind, but he figured that it was a way of showing off his village's might, and when he opened it, he knew that it was. Over 80 bandits were killed in 3 days, each of them covered in blood, and bite marks or missing body parts altogether. If it sickened him, the man hated well. Do you support cannibalism? The man asked with a sickened undertone that would have gone unheard by lesser men. He shook his head. No, his squad isn't exactly what I'd like working for me, but as far as we know it's something to do with their bloodline, and they're completely loyal to him, and won't defy his orders. While he disapproved of the methods, I had to admit that having a squad capable of doing these things would do wonders for any village, in both military settings for their loyalty and ability, while the fear they could cause would give them much needed political clout to throw around. While it was seen as an act against nature, cannibalism wasn't illegal. Only when you murdered innocents or robbed graves did it become a problem. As a matter of fact, some ancient clans would cook and eat their enemies hoping to gain their power. Back then it was perfectly acceptable, and while their numbers had dwindled down, some still lived in solitude, far from those who would discriminate against their ways. Tai Haruno was a normal boy, well as normal as one could be growing up with pink hair. His mother was the sister of Suki Haruno, making him the older cousin to Sakura Haruno, the clan heir by 1 year. But unlike Sakura, he never made it past the academy, and failed the exam, forcing him to take a place working in the clan. He had never picked on or made fun of his cousin, and thankfully his mother was still friends with her sister, so Suki was more than happy to give him a nice job with the clan business. It wasn't hard, mostly running back and forth to pick up things or filing paperwork. But it was better than having to farm or wait on tables somewhere. Besides Suki herself, he was probably one of the most informed people about the going-ones around the clan, as he had often been in the room working, while Suki was gossiping. But lately, he had seen her cut down on her gossip to take more time on her looks, laying out in the sun, working on her tan, going shopping, getting fitted for nice dresses, and spending much more time preening in the mirror or at the salon. Far be it for him to accuse her of being a gold digger, but everything had finally come together with his latest task: go to the Namikaze manor, and give the sole Namikaze an invitation to a nice dinner with the Haruno clan head. It would seem that she wanted to marry into the Namikaze clan or get some sort of an alliance with him at the least. Tai walked up to the gates that surrounded the Namikaze manor. Normally he'd just leave it in the mail slot that was built into the wall, but Suki wanted him to make sure that it was handed to the blonde. He pressed the buzzer next to the heavy iron gate, and waited, hoping that the guy was home, and not out in the village. May I help you? The pink-haired teen inhaled sharply at the sudden voice from behind him, and quickly turned on his feet to see the cloaked woman that he soon recognized from the gossip he overheard from Suki. Her voice was cold, like a winter breeze, but not a hostile. From what he still knew from his classes back in the academy, it meant that his chances of entering the property were as good as getting into the Fire Lord's palace and sleeping with his daughter. Ms. Suki Haruno sent it to me. She asked if Lord Namikaze would get this invention. He spoke as he pulled out a pink scroll bearing the Haruno clan mark. Caillou looked at the scroll, not that he could tell due to the hood. He is busy. Give me the scroll, and I'll see that he gets it. I'm supposed to hand it to him directly, he told her, to make sure he sees it. The two fell into a tense silence. Tai hadn't been lying. He had to make sure that the Namikaze got it, but he wasn't sure if handing it to her would count. Well, Caillou wasn't going to let the boy in. You can hand it to me, and I'll make certain that he gets it or not, she told him in a colder tone. You will not pass this gate and interrupt him. I can also make certain of that, as well. After a second he caved, handing her the pink roll of paper. Fine, but please make sure he gets it. Taking it, and hiding it under her cloak, Caillou stepped aside, and watched the team leave, before entering the clan grounds herself, and traveling up the path, only to find a pile of sand beside the house, while her enhanced senses picked up wet sounds, and the smell of sex. Following her nose, the demon fox walked into the manor, and found her master sitting on the couch, while Gar kneeled between his legs, her head bobbing up and down at a steady pace. "Welcome back, Kyuubi," Naruto greeted evenly, as he enjoyed the feel of what the genin was doing. Looking down at her fellow Redeed and servant to the blonde devil, Kyuubi told him about the message before opening it, when he told her to read what it was about. An invitation from the Haruno clan. Naruto repeated after she was finished, "Guess I should have expected it. It says to wear a kimono, so will you be going?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I'm not too hungry, just finished eating not too long ago. As a matter of fact, I'm having dessert right now, care to join?" Gazing at the bare end of Gar, Kyuubi shook her head. "I'd rather have you all to myself, I'll just wait until later." Naruto hummed, "Suit yourself, but since you now have some free time you can go check on Aim. I think she's playing maid upstairs. Oh, and tell her to look through my closets, and to find something presentable. I might as well go see what they want, not like I have anything else planned for tonight." The fox nodded, and walked off to find the other human girl, the sound of her master grunting reaching her ears, just before she reached the stairs. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.